Thank you for joining our presentation, Leadership in Construction, Building Skills for the New Economy. I am Stephen with Criterion. We're a publisher of Criterion HCM, a comprehensive HCM system designed for construction and engineering companies based on our 30 years of experience in HR and payroll systems. From core HR to talent engagement, recruiting, onboarding performance, learning and compensation management, to true project labor costing payroll, Criterion is HCM without compromise. Joining me is Gloria McConnell with Success Labs. So please, Gloria, introduce yourself and your company.
Hi, everyone. Yes, I'm Gloria McConnell, and I work at Success Labs in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. We've been in business for over 30 years. And what we do is we help businesses line up their people strategy with their business strategy. So we focus on helping mostly business to business with leadership development, strategic and organizational development and planning. I do a lot of leadership classes for first-line supervisors and other types of managers. And we have clients all across the US and even some in the UK and Canada. So thanks for inviting me to talk to you today, Stephen.
Very good. Thank you so much. For everyone that's attending, we'll let you know that this session is being recorded, and we'll be sending it out, later on with some documentation as well. And we will be inviting you to join the conversation a little bit later on in this presentation. But if you have questions or comments that you'd like to present, just put them in the chat box for now, and we'll be able to follow up with you then. So let's get started. Our conversation today is leadership in construction, building skills for the new economy. And, having worked in construction and with construction companies for more than 30 years, a lot of this is not new news. It's maybe a reminder that you should be doing these things as opposed to, oh, this is a aha moment, if you will. But let's just start out here about skills. And I just want to touch on this. What we're talking about today are what I term soft skills, things that you do not, necessarily that you're qualified to operate a piece of equipment or, doing a takeoff on a set of plans to do a bid. This is more about how, leaders can work within their organization. So one of the first things is looking at things from a big picture perspective, right? You want to be able to look forward where we need to be in 1 year and 5 years out, and then looking around to see, do we have those skills or do we have those people, here? Are we developing those people here? And if not, where do we need to go, right? So do we need to go out and, recruit for those people, looking for those particular things? We talk about attracting and retaining, people these days. And one of those things that I always hear about is, hey, let's make sure if we've got them internally, let's build on who we have, as opposed to trying to go out and find that. But one of those things that we need to talk about is, how do we do that? How do we build those people's skills up? And one of these is for the leaders. They have to build this skill up, right? Delegating and making sure that happens. So I know you have some points that you want to bring up, Gloria. So let's just talk about delegating to get started.
Okay, well, let me back up just a minute and talk a little bit about what you said around strategic planning and thinking strategically. For me, and what I see with a lot of my clients is it really starts with acknowledging and understanding that you have to step back and look at the long term and the big picture. When you get to certain levels in an organization, you need to be able to get out of the day-to-day and actually spend time and have intention around, hey, what's this going to look like 5, 10 years from now? And depending on what kind of industry you're in, it might be even further out, 50 years, 100 years, which it kind of boggles the mind. But certain industries, that's what you're really thinking about. And then the biggest challenge I see with having time to be strategic is one is a lot of people just don't know how, but the other one is that we are very much caught up in day to day, things that are urgent that pop up, firefighting to some extent. So those things happen and tend to take our attention, and we don't then schedule that time to discuss where we're going and how we're going to get there. One of the reasons why I think is because we tend to reward firefighting in organizations. Somebody gallops in and saves the day when something happens, when there's a crisis. And, everyone is very happy about it, and they get a lot of praise and that sort of thing. But you very rarely see anyone, getting a plaque that says, hey, great job. You scheduled some time to be strategic and plan strategically. Thank you. We just don't reward it. We understand the value of it, but most of what we put a spotlight on in terms of positive feedback is we handled a crisis. So for organizations that want to be more strategic, I think that's something that you have to take a look at is, what are you valuing? What are you expecting from your senior leaders and even your middle managers? What are you rewarding in the organization? Do people have time to do that? With the pandemic and everybody working, or so many people working remotely, I feel like that's one of the things that maybe has fallen by the wayside. A lot of people will say, man, COVID's really helped me. I'm so productive. My emails, all my emails are answered. My inbox has never been so clean. And there's a good feeling around that, right? It's a feeling of accomplishment, like, wow, I really knocked it out of the park today and I got all my work done. But, productivity and results can be the death of being strategic. Things like developing relationships with people, getting together and kind of spitballing about what's going on and what you're seeing coming down. A lot of the clients that I've worked with, those kinds of activities have taken a back seat because it's like, well, everybody's just at home. Let's just get our work done. So it'll be interesting 5 years from now to be like, why are we not ready for the future? And to kind of think about, well, how did this happen? How did we find ourselves in this position behind where we want to be? And I think you're going to go back and say, well, we've really got a lot of work done back in 2020, 2021, but we didn't do some of those necessary long-term strategic things that would have had us in a better space today. So I wanted to
catch on to that, just to, I'll let you continue on, but it sounds like that fostering those internal relationships is really all about helping the organization grow. And part of that is, I guess, building confidence in who you have, on board, being able to take over things, that as a leader, I normally would have done this, but I would, I need to assign it, and take it off my plate and put it on somebody else's.
Yeah, whether it's delegation, whether it's including more junior members in those conversations and those kinds of meetings so that they get exposure and visibility and they understand, what does it mean to be strategic? So I think we talk about that a lot. We're like, you need to be strategic. You need to plan for the long term. You need to broaden your business perspective. We talk about that, but what we don't necessarily talk about is, okay, how do we do that, right? That's kind of a big topic. How do I develop those skills as, let me say a middle manager? How do I develop the skills that I'm going to need to be in more senior positions? And so we see that a lot here with like senior individual contributors or mid-level managers, is it's holding them back. It's holding them back to not understand and know how to do that. So your leadership, your top level leadership should be really constantly looking for, if you're looking around the table and there's no one in there that doesn't have those skills, it's a signal. Let's bring some more people into this room so they get this exposure, so we meet them and they gain that confidence and understanding of what goes on in this room as we talk about strategy and the long term.
Absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about now how to build that confidence. And I know it's a lot about delegating, and we'll
Yes.
talk about the steps after that in a minute, but it's more about, how, or I know you've got some things lined up. So we'll just go into delegating and I'll leave it at that.
Okay. All right. So I'm putting in the chat here a little a delegation poll, right? I want people to think about what is your biggest challenge with delegation? It's a big topic. And when I work with people who've been leading a long time, so senior people, and I ask them, what are some of your biggest leadership challenges? What do you constantly find yourself working on? And they'll say, first, they'll say strategic thinking, having time to plan, which, we've talked a good bit about that. And one of the other skills that they'll say is delegation, is taking my hands off of the work and allowing other people to do it, to learn how to do it. And it makes sense, right? I've put here kind of the top things that I hear. And they're all kind of rolled into one. I mean, one of them is time. I've talked about that already. We spend our time in firefighting mode, in working on the urgent. And so we feel like I don't have time to delegate, right? I'm too busy. I don't have time to delegate. And one of the things that I like to say is, when you come to me, let's say I'm coaching you on delegation and you say, Gloria, I don't have time to delegate, right? Or I'll say, you need to find one thing that you're doing and you need to delegate it. I don't have time to delegate. I'm so busy, blah, blah, blah. What do I do? And I said, okay, well, then you need to find two things to delegate. So the less time you have to delegate, the more necessary it is to delegate, because it's a sign there, right? So it's an issue of time. Trust is another one. It's like, who's still accountable? You are. So when you delegate something and it doesn't go well, and let's say your boss comes and says, hey, what happened? You can't really say, well, I don't know, I delegated it, so whatever. No, it's still on you. The buck still stops with you. So, and that can be frightening for people, especially, and I might be speaking to a lot of them here, control freaks, perfectionists. They make great employees. We love them, right? But it gets in the way of delegation. And then the other one is the quality of the work. I can do it better, faster. For the time that it takes me to explain to you how to do it, I could have already done it 2 or 3 times myself. And that's true, right? Most of the time, people who get promoted in an organization are those people who have done the job the best. Right. Let's take, in a plant organization, for example, I have a lot of clients in manufacturing. Who's the next supervisor? It's whoever was the best operator. That's the person who automatically is looked at to be the next supervisor. Well, they might be a great operator for reasons of, they know everything. They're very quick to do the work. They do it right the first time. Again, that's where the perfectionists come in. We love those people. We promote them to supervisor and we're like, no, you got to take your hands off this. And they're like, what? Right. And so those things that make us good at being an individual contributor can actually get in the way when we become a leader. And now we have to get work done through other people. So all of those things are true. But if you take a look at them, the benefits to delegation and the challenges for delegation are really opposite sides of the same coin, right? I don't have time to delegate. All right, well, you will find time if you start delegating. The quality isn't what I need it to be. You need to train people so that the quality is you'll get better quality. Nobody can do it as fast as I can, or I can't trust them. You build that trust in them by letting them do. So the challenges and the benefits are really the same thing. I call one is the cost, right? The investment that you need to make. And on the other side is the benefit that you get from it, the return. So it's really about sitting back and doing a return on investment, an ROI. What's it going to take me to get this return? Meaning I have people who are competent and confident in doing the work. It's going to take an investment on my part to make that happen. In the short term, it's harder. It's going to take you longer. But again, here's where delegation and strategic thinking and strategic planning line up. is you got to delegate so that you free yourself to be able to do those higher level things.
So we've got strategic thinking, we got a plan not only, for next week, but we got a plan for the next year, 5 years, 10 years out, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the only way we can have time for that is that we need to delegate at least some things. There is that risk reward type of thing. I think when you delegate, feel like you're taking a risk, and by giving it to a junior member of the organization to complete and so forth. And sometimes it doesn't work, right? You get, you give them something to complete, and you said, oh my gosh, I should have just done that myself. And or the more important thing is what was it we call it in parenting, a teachable moment, right? How do we take that, I don't know, lack of completion, whether it's, they didn't have all the right information, they didn't put it together in the right way, or whatever that might be.
Mm-hmm.
And how do we turn around and give them, feedback? It's, as leaders, that's part of your culture, right? Your company culture. Feedback, sometimes if it's always direct, it's always negative, there's not a, two-way communication, it becomes perceived as a, authoritarian, or, just a dominant kind of a relationship in the organization, and the organization builds on that or feeds on that culture, right? So how do we take that and use that next thing, which is giving and receiving feedback in a way that's constructive, conducive to bringing apart change and building those other skills in those people in the organization.
Yeah. When we talk about the skill of delegation, so when I teach this skill in the classes that I do, if I'm coaching someone, I teach it last in a series. Delegation is really hard. I mean, we've established that, but the skills required to delegate effectively, there are a lot of things you need to get good at so that you can delegate effectively. You need to be able to set expectations, for example. What is the quality and quantity of the work? What's the time frame that the work needs to be completed in? What kind of decisions need to be made as somebody goes about completing that task? What kind of resources do they need? Do they need access to other people, data, information? Do they have the right privileges in the software that they're using to complete the task? Do they know the people? Like, do they have sufficient relationships internally to the organization and even externally to the organization to be good at that task? These are things that leaders really have to think through to set people up for success, and to be able to communicate to them, this is what I need done. What happens is that we skip those steps. We might assume a person has a certain level of experience or level of understanding or even confidence, and so we skip too far ahead, and then we are unsatisfied with the result. And then instead of sitting down and talking about it, we're just like, I'm never doing that again. That was a disaster, right? I should have just done it myself. It all gets in the way of delegation. So those of you out there who are leaders or who get delegated to, I want you to take the word just and delegation, and I want you to separate them and never use them, right? Just delegate that. There's no just about delegation. It's complicated and it's difficult. And so Stephen mentioned one of the key skills around delegation is actually giving and receiving feedback. So after you have described the activity, you have to check in on it. If you are delegating something, let's say a project that's due in 6 months, don't wait 5.5 months the first time you check in. Right? There's not going to be enough time to get it back on track if the person has veered off track. Set some milestones that are reasonable for the job itself, and the person's ability. And then the third thing is your own comfort level. So sometimes we're not really transparent about what our fears are with delegation. And we kind of, oh, I'm going to try to do this without totally communicating to the other person our level of discomfort. But I'm going to tell you that most people are okay if you say, look, I'm going to delegate this to you, and I want you to do it exactly this way. There might be different ways to do it, but I'm not real comfortable yet with delegation. So please do it in this way. And once you've got the hang of it, that's going to build, that's going to calm me down enough to where I can back off. Right. So just being transparent and upfront and saying, I don't want to micromanage you. That's not what I'm trying to do. I'm just like super worried about this. If that's what helps you to delegate, then start doing that, but be transparent about it. And I think the other people will say, I understand, right? But if we come in there and we just say, oh no, it must be done this way and there's no other way, a lot of times our employees will know there's different ways to do this. You're just bird dogging me, right? I don't know if that's a phrase that other people use, but down here in the South, right? Bird dogging me. Right. No, I'm not trying to do that. I'm super nervous about this because it's important and I'm still accountable. So that transparency is important. So setting it up originally with that kind of background and transparency and appropriate checkpoints and so forth, that's going to help that person be successful. Now at those checkpoints, you're going to have to give feedback, look at what's being done, ask appropriate questions about the status of the work and the quality and the quantity of the work. And if it's not up to par, if it doesn't meet your expectations, you need to say something, right? And giving feedback. So, I mentioned when I talk to leaders who've been leading a long time, what are your challenges with these leadership skills? They say strategic planning and thinking, delegation, and the last one is always giving constructive feedback. When something is not going right, it's a challenge for me. I don't want to hurt people's feelings. We're kind of shy about it. So, I feel like the world is divided in terms of giving feedback into two different types. Those who say that giving negative feedback is hard, and those who are doing it the wrong way, right? When you're telling somebody that their work isn't up to scratch, it should be a little bit awkward, right? We don't like to tell other people that. And so, and I don't mean that we need to soft shoe it and kind of beat around the bush. It does need to be direct and objective. However, there's ways to do it that is more of a growth and development. So for example, let's say you've delegated something and you go to follow up on the progress and check the work. What I like to say is, here's how you give feedback. These things look good. Thank you. Next time, I want you to do these things this way. Okay? So it's still constructive feedback. You're still telling them, this is not the right way to do it, but it's a much more positive way to say, this doesn't meet my expectations. I know if somebody delegates something to me and then I show them my work and they're like, this is wrong. I mean, my first reaction on the inside is going to be, okay, well then do it yourself. Right. But if they say, look, this looks good, next time do this a different way, I feel like that's really positive. One, I'm getting some props for what I did well. And two, you're speaking, the way you say next time means I'm going to get to do that again. You're not going to take that away from me. And for those of you thinking, oh, well, employees don't want more work piled on them, that can be true. But your people who want to develop, want to grow in the organization, they want challenges. They're motivated by doing different, interesting work, having those opportunities to grow and develop. And, maybe take your job one day when you decide to retire or win the lottery or whatever it is that you do. So there's a process, just like for delegation, there's a process for giving and receiving feedback, being objective and specific with what's going on, making sure the timing is correct. If it's constructive feedback, doing that privately so that you don't embarrass the person or the people around. Right. I don't like to be in a place where somebody else is getting negative feedback. It's, I feel sorry for them. It's kind of awkward. Anticipating how the person is going to respond to the feedback. If this is somebody who's kind of sensitive or they don't have a lot of confidence in what they do. You need to take that into account in how you're delivering that feedback. Some people, you might have some really ambitious people or like thick-skinned people who just give me the facts, right? Tell me what I did wrong. That's all I need to know. Some people, can I get some props for what I did well, right? So giving and receiving feedback is another one of those skills that's multi-layered. You have to know your employees, you have to know them as people and somewhat their personality preferences, their communication preferences, so that you as a leader tailor your message to be the most effective with the person involved in the situation. So again, a lot of different things going on when we say give and receive feedback. Look at yourself in a mirror. How well do you do? How well do you receive feedback? If somebody tells you you're doing something wrong, what's your reaction? Again, on the inside, my reaction is, are we doing this right? I don't like to be told that I'm wrong or that I didn't do something well. I don't like that. I teach this stuff and I don't like to hear it. But how I behave on the outside when somebody does give me that feedback, you're setting an example, you're setting a tone in your organization for, none of us are perfect. And we all need coaching and guidance. And look, if I'm doing everything perfectly, 100% right, either I'm not trying hard enough or somebody needs to give me some other stuff to do.
Yeah, it's interesting because I've been in this business for 30 plus years, and we used to talk about performance reviews, and then it's performance appraisals, and so many times when we're doing those things, you'd ask people to rate on listening skills or things like that, some kind of odd thing that you go and say like, oh, I rate you a 4 on your listening skills or something like that. But more and more companies are asking questions more like, how you doing? What can we do to help you? And I think, to that point, a lot of them are asking for the employees' feedback first, because a lot of times they're more critical of themselves than the leader can be of them. How did you do? How do you think you did on that project?
Yes.
Versus the leader jumping right in and saying, hey, this, I like this and this and this, but here's some other things that you might want to try. How does that line up with what you're talking about?
I think it lines up very well. So employees need a vocabulary and somewhat permission to talk about their own performance and behaviors in a way that is realistic and true. So I do like the element of have employees do a self-evaluation first, whether it's a formal performance review or it's one of the maybe a mid-cycle or informal type of coaching session. So starting with that and having what I call specific but open-ended questions. It's funny, I have a daughter, she's 23, so she's in her first career. And we talked just this morning because she's having a meeting with her boss about her performance on a particular project. And she's like, yeah, I'm supposed to come in there and tell them what I think, but I don't know. And she's 23, she's young, but I said, here's what you should think about is first of all, what do you think that you did well? What was easy for you? What turned out really good in the work that you did? The second thing would be what did you struggle with the most? Was there anything that you just weren't really sure about, but you did it anyway, and that you're a little concerned that maybe that it wasn't completely right. And then the other question that I think is extremely positive is what did you learn from doing this project? Where are you now versus where you were before you even started this project? And that gives them a really good framework to think about how they did, right? Because it's open-ended to say how you think you did, but it's not specific enough for a lot of people to really and truly be able to think about that. And when you say, what did you learn or what do you struggle with? it gives that permission for people to not be great at something, right?
Mhm.
So and so, you know, for your younger employees or really anybody within your organization, to be able to truly and really think about their own performance is key. And then if you get lucky, you might be like, man, I see the same thing, right? I see the same thing, and it's a great conversation to have. It's very positive. If you don't agree, right? If they say, well, I think I did these things well, then you do have to, you know, then it's a conversation. Say, well, you know, here's what I saw, right? So let's talk about that, because my perception and your perception are different. So let's talk about that. And then that just becomes a discussion, right?
Mhm.
Of a discussion of where we see things differently. So, you know, of course, my daughter said, you know, after I gave her all this golden information, she was like, thanks, coach, right? Because she's my daughter. But yeah, the fact that she still asks the questions tell me that it is meaningful to her for, you know, to be able to have the skills to be able to have this type of conversation. Then when you go to document in a performance review, then you have really specific examples. It's not just kind of generalization, oh, get better at this, improve this. We know that, right? We're talking about performance review. I didn't get the rating that I wanted to do. Obviously, I'd have some work to do. Again, what is it that I can do to increase my performance? Let's say listening, right? Listening is a key skill. We all say, you need to listen better. You need to listen better. Well, how, right? If I'm a poor listener, you just say you need to listen better. Maybe I don't know how to listen. Maybe I don't know what my specific challenges are. So being specific with those examples is totally helpful in terms of driving better performance, documenting it in your systems that matter, because that's an important record, and in getting the employee to, oh yeah, I can do that, right? I can get better at that by doing these things.
Yeah. And then even, you know, coming up with a plan, you know, structure around getting better, right? Maybe there's, you know, I don't know, a course, or maybe there's a, you know, an interaction that employee can do to improve upon that particular piece. So, all right. So
Right.
we talk about strategic thinking and how it's important, but to get there, you know, you got to delegate. And if you delegate, well, not if you, but when you delegate,
Yeah.
you need to provide that extra, you know, piece of the puzzle there to give and receive yourself feedback. I mean, because one of the feedback might be, hey, you didn't give me enough information when you delegated this to me, so I can't complete it. So, and you got to be able to respond to that as well. So,
Right.
so we got the strategic thing, and we got delegation, and we got feedback. So the next question is, how do you do this?
Yes.
So I'll set you up with the first one. It's real easy here. It's, when should leaders begin working on these skills?
Before they need them, which is tough. But here's what we see in our field. I spoke a little bit about individual contributors, people who don't have employees yet, right? Typically, what makes a great individual contributor are people who know what they're doing and they get things done. Right? Those two qualities right there gets you promoted. But they have to be both, right? Because we know of people who know what they're doing, but they don't get it done. Right? They're unmotivated, they're whatever's going on with them. They know they're skilled, but they're still not getting the work done. Or those frightening people who don't know what they're doing and they get stuff done, right? That's like, yikes, right? Yeah. So when you put the two of them together, you will get promoted. So when I work with individual contributors or junior level people, young people, like, you need to be really good. You need to get your work done and you need to do it well, and you will get promoted. However, right, you'll get promoted to the next level or to be a supervisor. Well, knowing what you're doing and getting your work done has nothing to do with leadership, right? Leadership is about getting work done through others, coaching and developing, guiding, leading the organization, building relationships. And there's really no part of that that's about getting it done and doing it well. So while you are an individual contributor, how do you develop the skills of getting work done through others if you're not the boss yet? Your senior people is give them some of those opportunities through delegation, have them lead a project, have them mentor or guide or coach informally less experienced members of the team. Let them take on an intern, for example. If you have a summer intern or seasonal interns, let them run that. You're going to have to give them a lot of feedback and coaching. They don't know how to lead people. You know, just because you're good at what you do and you know what you're doing doesn't mean that you can lead others. So expect to have a good bit of time directing and guiding them. The other thing to do is to identify what their weaknesses might be. So what I find in my work is a lot of people who are really good at what they're doing and they get a lot of work done. They're often impatient. Sometimes their composure kind of gets in the way. They can be kind of hot-headed or, super driven. They might not be very sensitive to the feelings of others. So things like interpersonal savvy, good listening skills, and those things, you really need to diagnose where they are on that scale so that when you do have them leading others, that they don't misstep in that regard. So, when I teach some leadership classes, I teach one that's really directed at first line supervisors, and I cover a lot of communication. So listening well, and assertive communication. I also cover what I call composure and professional presence and self-awareness, understanding who you are and that other people might be different. So look at the people in your organization who you would consider one day promoting into a leadership position, and really look carefully at some of those other key skills and find things that they can do to practice those skills. When you're a middle manager and you're looking to move into senior leadership, and again, a lot of times middle managers struggle with strategic thinking, broad business perspective, and so forth, bring them into those kinds of meetings. Development happens on the field, not on the bench, right? The only way that you know what you have is to put people into play. And so how do you find opportunities to see what they can do out on the field, let them practice, and that way when the position becomes available, they have a much easier time getting there. How far in advance? It depends. First line supervision, I like to work with people 6 months to 12 months before they're officially in that position to help them work on the skills. Some of it's because you want them to get a feel for what it's like, because some might say, you know what, I don't want to be the supervisor, right? I don't like it at all. And that's okay, right? Same thing with middle managers. It's probably going to take a little bit. Ideally, again, in an ideal world, I would say, give them a year or two of being in the room and experiencing that, delegating some key things to them, get them ready, because then you're going to be pushing them onto a bigger stage, and the consequences of failure there can be maybe a little bit more far reaching than necessarily a first line supervisor.
Yeah, I found a couple of points that are really great because, going back to these sports analogies, number one is like, just because you're the ace pitcher or the great quarterback does not mean you're a great coach. And in fact, you look at all the great coaches, very rarely were they the ones that, were the exceptional ball player. And I did like the other idea that, not everybody either wants to or has the temperament or skill set to be the leader or a leader. It's like, I'm just happy doing what I'm doing. Yeah. And that, hey, we need you too,
Exactly.
It's like, so how do you, bring skills development and integrate it into a broader kind of talent and business strategy?
So we do work with a lot of clients on their succession plan, right? Getting ready for the future. And you really do have to start out with taking a look at who you have, all of your employees. What is the employee population? That's an important part of it. An equally important part, though, is actually separating the people who are currently in the jobs separate the thinking about that to only thinking about the job itself. What are the critical skills required for that position? A lot of times when we think about succession, we're looking up at the top, right? The CEOs and the C-suite type individuals. But really, and no offense, but there's plenty of CEOs around, right? There's plenty of CFOs, CEOs. There may be positions in your organization that are unique. An administrative person who supports a key manager, for example, an IT person who knows the whole structure of your information technology system, right? Because a lot of times those can tend to get cobbled together over the years. Those people have that unique singular experience and knowledge that can be very, very difficult to replicate. Sometimes you can go out on the market and kind of hire externally or third party, but really taking a look at the positions and having certain criteria about how rare it is, how difficult it would be to find in the outside of the organization, what the relationship network looks like for being successful in that position. I once coached someone on what we call knowledge transfer. And this was an employee who'd been a superintendent level person for many, many years at one of the chemical companies. And he was retiring. And so I was hired to help with that strategy. And probably the most important relationship that this individual had was that he was boyhood friends with the person who ran the trains, right? So basically the person who keeps the trains running on time, he and this guy were childhood friends, and they got together every week and had breakfast. And whenever there was an issue with incoming or exporting, he had this relationship that he could leverage for the benefit of his organization. Okay, that's a pretty singular thing, right? And so that's the kind of thing that organizations really need to think about, is not only who's getting the work done, how are we getting the work done, and can we replicate that? And it's a business sustainability concern.
So it's really focusing on that individual's role within the organization, not necessarily their title, right?
Correct.
Yeah. So how do you document all this? How do you, and provide, skills development, and so forth? We've got software, that does a lot of this, but
Yes.
how is it done? I mean, what's the, what does it say? Automating a bad system doesn't get you anywhere. It just gets you there faster, right? Or something like
Right.
that,
Right.
So how do you document all this?
You document it so that it's accessible to the people who need to have it, and only to them. Sometimes development information is personal in nature and confidential in nature. So you have to have secure systems to make sure that only the people who are in a position to see it can see it. At the same time, it does need to be visible to people throughout the organization who actually do need to see it. You don't want to have a system where people are having to capture the same information in multiple places, because they won't do it. They just won't. People are too busy to do that. And then the other thing is that you have to have a system that, so, a lot of times in organizations, when we talk about goals and objectives, we're telling people, you got to think big, right? Where do we want to go? You got to think big. In the world of development, though, when it comes to, okay, what are we going to do to get there? I say you got to think smaller. You have to think about individual actions in a smaller way that are easier for people to get around. And I love a sports analogy. I used to coach soccer when my girls were young. And, when you coach soccer, you don't just say, we need to win all the games this season. That's my strategy, right? No, right? You need to start with this practice. We're going to work on ball control. This practice, we're going to work on positioning and passing. So we are breaking the skills down into components that are actionable and repeatable, build that muscle, and then start putting those pieces together. And there's your game strategy, right? So it's about being specific, objective. You're still goal oriented. Let's say the skill of delegation, right? I say, okay, you can't have on a development plan, oh, I'm going to delegate more. Duh, that's the whole point, right? But I'm going to make a list of all the things that I do. I'm going to put names by each one of those items. I'm going to step back and look at that list, and I'm going to pick one, and I'm going to follow a process to delegate that, right? And by the end of, let's say, 2 months, my goal is that I will have gotten this particular task off my plate. And so thinking smaller and having a system that will allow you to put enough information, but also detailed and specific enough to be truly meaningful.
Fantastic, fantastic. Hey, I think we've got some time for other folks to join in and ask some questions. Right. So I'm going to open this up, and and maybe somebody who's feeling rather social can jump in here and ask away.
What you got?
I'm not sure. All right. We'll give it here just a couple more minutes just to see if somebody can get off their mute and give us a question.
Someone put a comment here, Cindy, about when delegation fails, the leader first needs to identify what they could have done differently, right? And recommending a self-evaluation development along with coaching the employee. I think that's a really good point. And so having a structure by which you delegate it can help you from, making that error where you're not clear enough, when you're not good enough with the delegation, and then evaluating that based on the results that you get. Another thing that I recommend is again, being transparent. So look, I'm going to start delegating, and these are the steps that I'm going to follow when I'm delegating something to you. And I'm going to ask you after, we have that conversation, what did I miss? What do you still need to know? And then even after the delegated event happens, ask those questions that will help guide you on, did I do a good job of delegating to begin with? One of the hardest things I think that when we're delegating is that we have a lot of assumptions. We don't realize all that we know that helps us to be successful in the task. And so we fail, of course, to communicate it, because it's kind of like when I drive home from work and I get into my garage, I pretty much have no idea how I got there, right? None, right? It is so routine and second nature that I'm not even thinking, is it the 3rd Street or the 4th Street that I turn left on? And it's too second nature. And so when you delegate a task, it could happen the same way, where you kind of forget all that goes into doing that task. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for everyone out there that has listened in. And if you'd like more information about Gloria's organization, Success Labs, here's her contact information. And of course, if you want to know more about Criterion HCM, here's a way to get a hold of us as well. We appreciate your time today. And like I said at the beginning, we recorded this, so we will be sending out the link to this as well as some follow-up documentation. Thanks again, and have a good day.
Thanks, everyone.